Hello, I'm Alex Mercer. Welcome to Between the Cards. If you want to play strong poker, you need a way to think about hands that goes beyond what you are holding. You need a way to think about what your opponent can have. That means building a range. Not a vague idea, not a feeling, but a structured picture of the hands that make sense for them to arrive with. In this episode, we will walk through how to build an opponent's range from pre-flop to river, end to end, across every street. Not to guess one hand, but to understand what remains in the range and why. This is not about being clever. This is about being systematic. Strong players do not read minds. They remove hands that no longer make sense. They keep hands that still do. And they update that picture after every action. That is the work. Let's start at the beginning. Preflop is where ranges are born. Before any cards hit the board, your opponent's position, stack depth, and action define the initial shape of their range. An early position open is not the same as a button open. A 3-bet from the small blind does not carry the same meaning as a flat call on the button. This is not about memorizing charts. It is about understanding incentives. Players open tighter from early position because they face more pressure. They defend wider on the button because they have position. They 3-bet more when they expect folds. So when an opponent takes a pre-flop action, you are not assigning them one hand. You are assigning them a set of hands that make sense for that spot. That is your starting range. Now the flop arrives. The board interacts with the pre-flop range in specific ways. Some boards connect well with early position ranges. Some boards favor the caller. Some boards shift pressure toward the better. When your opponent bets the flop, that action removes some hands and keeps others. Very weak hands are often removed. Some strong hands remain. Some medium strength hands may continue, depending on the player and the board. This is where many players make their first mistake. They collapse the range too fast. They see a bet and assume strength. They see a check and assume weakness. Strong players do not do that. They ask a quieter question. Which hands from the original range would choose this action on this board? Some players continuation bet wide. Some bet only when they connect. Some split their range between betting and checking. So the same action can mean different things for different opponents. The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to be reasonable. After the flop action, you remove hands that clearly would not take that line. You keep hands that plausibly would. That is range construction. Now we move to the turn. This is where ranges begin to narrow. The turn card changes incentives. It completes some draws. It weakens some value hands. It introduces new threats. When your opponent continues betting, checks back, or changes sizing, that shapes how their range is distributed. A large turn bet often polarizes a range. It pushes medium strength hands out of the betting line. It concentrates value and bluffs. A small turn bet keeps more of the range intact. It allows medium strength hands to bet for protection or thin value. A check can mean pot control. It can mean a give up. It can mean a trap. Again, the action does not define one hand. It reshapes the range. At this point, many hands from the original pre-flop range no longer make sense. Some draws are gone. Some weak top pairs fall away. Some strong hands remain. You are not guessing what they have. You are trimming what they cannot have. That is the discipline. Now we reach the river. By the time the river arrives, the opponent's range is a small part of where it began. Every street has filtered it. The river bet, check, or shove is not a standalone event. It is the final expression of the line they have taken. This is where strong players think in terms of distribution. Is the remaining range polarized? Is it merged? Does it contain enough bluffs to justify a call? Does it contain enough value to justify a fold? You are no longer asking, do they have it? You are asking, how does my hand perform against the range that logically arrives here? This is the difference between guessing and thinking. There is one more layer that matters. Removal. As ranges narrow, blockers become more important. If your hand blocks natural bluffs, the remaining range becomes more value-heavy. If your hand blocks value, the remaining range becomes more bluff-heavy. This does not turn a bad call into a good one by itself, but it can shift the balance at the margin. Strong players use this as a final adjustment, not as the primary reason. The structure always comes first. Let's put this together. Range construction is not about being right about one hand. It is about being consistent with a process. You start with a reasonable pre-flop range. You filter it based on flop interaction and action. You narrow it further on the turn based on sizing and incentives. You arrive on the river with a range that makes sense given the full line. Then you compare your hand to that range. Not to the story you are telling yourself, not to the outcome you hope for, but to the distribution of hands that logically remain. This is what strong players are doing, even when it looks simple on the surface. They are not guessing, they are removing. That is how you build an opponent range from pre-flop to river. Not perfectly, but structurally. And that structure is what holds up when the result does not go your way. I'm Alex Mercer, and that's The Spot.